Have you ever heard the expression, everything is connected? It isn't just an old analogy used by spiritualists, but absolutely true. It's proven in more ways than one by science alone. The easiest way to understand this is that everything is made up of energy, much of what cannot be seen by the naked eye. I find it funny when people tell me they do not believe in anything they cannot see, touch, taste, hear, or feel, since there is so much more going on around us than they could possibly perceive with just their five senses. In fact, we have a bunch more senses that we don't even realize. Some examples include thermoception. I feel like that one's pretty self-explanatory, except to say that there is some debate, I guess, on if we both feel hot and cold under that, or if cold is one that deserves its own name. Then there's nociception, the perception of pain and toxins, equilibrioception, the perception of balance, proprioception, like knowing where your nose is basically with your eyes closed, or if you're upside down. Welcome back to Going 5D with Destiny Dawn. I'm your host, Destiny Dawn. Last episode, we discussed time, dimensions, and density as it applies to consciousness. Today, we are going to be talking about how we can relate consciousness to our minds and bodies within this 3D world in which we reside. Since it is my belief that once you have a solid understanding of just how in control we can be, the more empowered we become. Jumping right in, energy is, like I said, the simplest form to what people mean when they say everything is connected. Though any physicist will tell you there is nothing simple about it. Aside from the fact that we have acknowledged there is a scientific answer to many components of what we'll be discussing, I trust that you will be intrigued enough to further research curiosities that you take away from our discussion on your own. If you've read the suggested reading thus far, this will make it a way more sense to you than if you didn't. But for those who have not, or haven't listened to episode 2 at all for that matter, I highly recommend checking out A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. Not only is it going to make this make more sense, but it's just a great read, really. It really Dick and Janes a lot of these concepts. I myself have not yet checked out his final book, but after stumbling upon it while pulling up some of the names I needed for this episode, I am very intrigued. Turns out Dr. Hawking was actually exploring the concept of multiverses and formed some interesting theories of his own shortly before his death, so I can't wait to check that out. If you're anything like me, your first question was probably how, followed by why does this all matter? As discussed in our last episode, if we were able to perceive all of the realities around us, and remember that we are individuated consciousness fractals living in a physical meat suit in order to walk around and interact with others in a shared game of experiences, forgetting who we are long enough to be able to play the game. Without these shells in our brains filtering out much of what information we can access, without that filter and all the other perks of our gravity or spacesuits, I don't think there would be much use for our physical bodies, much less incarnating in the first place. Too much? I thought so too when I first started. When I first started to learn about these and other concepts as I was learning about meditation. As discussed in previous episodes, I really struggled to do meditation at first. I wasn't able to construct the images in my mind of what guided meditation people would be telling me to envision. Ironically, 5 months in, I would suffer pretty serious head injury, which made short-term memorization an even extra challenge for almost a year while I recovered. So I had to really rely on that being something that truly interested me enough to make me want to write it down in order to remember, which I still didn't do probably as well as I could have. Fortunately, I had gotten used to doing that for work, so while I don't like to think of this as work, it actually did help me a lot. Helped me to learn to remember and understand. If you struggle to remember things, I highly recommend writing everything down. You get better at it over time. It also occurred to me one day that I was a kinesthetic learner, which I had to Google because I was thinking I had to touch something to learn it, because it happened during a meditation and the word just popped into my head in response to my mantra regarding how I was going to proceed. I remember feeling really frustrated even before I had the head injury, because my big thing toward the beginning, like I talked about, was, I had all of this stress and I felt like I was going crazy because of it. And I was like, how can I make my memory better? How can I have just one thought at a time? And I really beat myself up about it a lot, to be honest. And the word just popped up in my head. Meditation just felt so right to me. Yet my mind would not calm down, and it would just be bits and pieces of imagery mixed with swirls of colors floating around in a dizzying swirl of Picasso-like fragments. It's all I could see floating around in my head. To this day, that's what I see until I calm my mind enough to just see colors. After learning that kinesthetic learning actually means that I am a hands-on learner, it made sense. It also made sense why my mind, and I believe my guides, explained it to me in that way. Because I'm a doer. I wondered if perhaps the fact that I'm a doer is because that's how my brain is programmed. As a low vision child, it seems logical since I couldn't form images in my mind like the other kids could, and I had no basis for comparison to know what was the right or wrong way of doing it. I'd go on to read about a phenomenon that happens to blind and low vision people, which explained that the parts of the brain actually take in the visual data and route it to the places it needs to go. Often does not work the same way for blind and low vision people, especially on the side for me that doesn't work at all. Instead, my brain uses the information from my good eye as it normally would, but not for my blind eye, since there's no data to receive. I believe a good portion of my visual center has been rerouted, and through neuroplasticity, that, you might say, energy is redirected, or that data or information, toward other senses. Definitely not my hearing, though. Ask my family. I believe my sense of touch is heightened, though. Interestingly, it is this type of rerouting that causes some with the same condition as I have to taste colors or sounds. It's actually pretty fascinating. Empowered by knowledge, I knew I actually had to experience the different types of meditation for myself, though. That I was going to be experiencing this journey in a way that was unique to me. That no blind or low vision person I could find had yet done, or at least documented and created guided meditations for, that I could use. Hearing about what they wanted to see was at least relaxing for me, though. So I had that going for me, but I think the swirling fragments were the result of minimal data input stored in a sort of, cache, you might say, the same place where our daily residue comes from. That's a term known in psychology. It contributes to our dreams each night, so we can sort through and process information, kind of mull it over in our sleep in an unconscious frame of mind where emotion isn't attached to it. We can't overthink it. It just comes naturally. In my case, it was extremely fragmented, so much so that it was indiscernible, until I found Kundalini and was able to reach a deep state of trance in meditation, at which time my mind was absolutely blown away by the imagery I was immersed in. It was like nothing that I had ever seen before, except in dreams. But we'll get to that later. Mind you, at this same time, I was also learning Reiki, which I had stumbled upon in my first attempts to meditate. since my instincts were to direct energy to parts of my body that were feeling achy. Apparently, I was doing a mix of Tai Chi and Reiki and didn't even realize it. In short, Kundalini is the belief that there are these nodes throughout our bodies that channel energy, referred to as prana throughout them. The main ones being the chakras. That nadis, which are tiny little beings that live within our bodies, help move this energy through. The first thing I thought of when I first read about those was one of those movies where you see the different cartoon characters working different jobs throughout your body, except I didn't think of them as external beings, but actually just different parts of me, like my spirit flowing through my body. In Kundalini, one must clear any blockages and have attained knowledge from that process in order to assure and maintain the proper flow of energy. Known as pranayama, which is the movement of energy, it is vital to our health and well-being and can help us to more easily overcome challenges within our daily lives. Mind you, I was also binging interviews with extra dimensionals, which I talked about previously, which made this all seem profoundly interconnected. I didn't go to Kundalini because I was watching this other thing. I was doing all of these separate forms of research, and I did find out that a lot of, spirituality is interconnected, but kind of seems like there's a reason for that. And there's a whole bunch of different beliefs. Kundalini isn't the only one. That was just the one that resonated with me. Other disciplines had similar explanations too, but something about Kundalini just really resonated with me. Ultimately, all pointed to a concept of raising one's vibration in order to tap into the divine, to be able to communicate with our higher selves, our guides, consciousness. Months later, I would stumble onto a series that explained the scientific side of that, and highly recommend you check it out. It's called Rewired. I think I've recommended it before too, about work done by Dr. Joe Dispenza, who spent his career trying to understand what happens to our brains during meditation. Fascinating stuff. And also the power of what our minds can accomplish. Various disciplines will tell you their own unique version of the source from which energy comes. I combine the parts of what I've learned into one explanation here, since it's what makes sense to me. So I'm going to kind of go through the chakras really quick, at least the main ones, because I want for you to understand them, especially since we're going to have a meditation accompanying this from my perspective, because like I said, I've combined a lot of different information into one source. I think there are aspects of many belief systems that resonate with me. I just like and follow Kundalini the most. And that's not to say that I, do all of the things Kundalini recommends. I'm still working on things. I also just want to be inclusive of all belief systems because I think that there are, positive and helpful aspects from all of them. So next we will discuss the 7 chakras, which you may or may not already be aware of. It is important to know, though, for the meditation, though this will only be kind of a broad strokes explanation. Starting with your crown chakra, associated most often with the colors gold and white. This is our direct connection to the divine source, from which we can draw collective energy and infinite wisdom from at any time. Learning to do so just makes it easier, but I think we all do it from time to time. That's where divine inspiration comes from. Sheer willpower comes from. We tap into something bigger than us. That's where it comes from. Next, and we've all probably heard of this, the third eye chakra. Located in the center of your forehead, it is most often associated with the colors indigo and purple. And when cross-sectioned straight down from the crown chakra and behind the third eye, you'll find the pineal gland, a transistor within the physical human brain, acting as a sort of transistor. It interprets the data received from our crown chakra, where it can be viewed using our third eye. Bet you hadn't heard that explanation before. Maybe, some of you. The throat chakra is located directly beneath in the throat area and is most often associated with the color blue. And you'll see some different variations of the color, but it's usually always blue. That is used for communicating, in particular for speaking our truths or a lack thereof. This one is often forgotten and or underutilized. In doing so, can and usually does present a number of issues as a result. Moving on, the heart chakra is our love center and connection to one another. Though it is often associated with the color green, I and many others who were conditioned to associate pink with love as well works just fine. Your solar plexus is after that, which is where most of our power reserves are stored. It's not where it's created so much, but where it's stored. And this is the same area where you would hear some disciplines describe that as our second brain. It's our powerhouse, you might say. It is most often associated with the colors yellow into a light orange, which can be likened to the upper half of our internal flame, you might say, which begins our sacral chakra. The sacral chakra is located between our hips and is the source of where our internal energy is created, as with life itself during the procreation process. The colors associated with the sacral chakra are pretty much just variations of orange. Finally, the root chakra is located between the genitals and anus, pointing downward generally. It is usually associated with the colors burnt orange and red, denoted by its earthy nature and our connection to the physical earth plane. I misspoke. It's not just pointed downward like kind of is, but it goes both ways because you take energy in and you put energy out, hence the root chakra. Now, most will tell you that the feet are where we ground, and to a certain degree, this is accurate. Don't get me wrong. I like to envision this too, since they're usually the part of the body the most often touching the ground. But the root and crown chakras are similar in being outlets for where you can both send and receive energy. I just say that just like with the outport or import. You don't want to think of it as just going one way or the other. That's one of the misnomers that I don't agree with in any one discipline, because they're all just channels, but the channel flows freely both ways. And I think that it's important to understand that. The same can be said of the chakra points themselves, which will be our area of focus for today. And when I guide you through the cleansing meditation. So you see, as with any conduit of energy, blockages occur easily and must be cleared out regularly in order to ensure proper functioning and flow. Now let's pause for just a second. And I didn't write this, but I want to include this thought. Even if you just likened that and equated it to psychology, you could. Because a lot of what you do when you're envisioning this is psychological. Even if you just chuck it up to the shadow work that goes along with meditation or sitting with something as your mantra, you're removing blockages, whether you mean that physically, metaphorically, however you want to see it. There is no bad thing anyone could possibly come up with as to why that would be a bad idea. As mentioned, chakras can be likened to ports through which energy flows. Each one is sort of a channel, has its own set of valves facing up and down, forward and backward. While nothing can truly impede the flow of energy, directing focus on each area helps us in addressing each and the needs of that sector, while maximizing efficiency and even improving and healing those areas over time. And I know that sounds crazy because it sounded crazy to me when I first learned about it. But it happens. The placebo effect is a real thing, but we'll get to that. It is believed that there are over 100 of these ports. There are actually, I want to say 114 or 117, at least in Kundalini. As you unlock them, your energy flows stronger, and so too does your vibration or frequency, which leads me to your aura. This can be reflected using certain types of equipment. The existence of an energy field surrounding people is well established, but not well understood. Who am I to argue with the knowledge pertaining to it that was handed down by our very own ancestors from all over the world? Nobody, that's who. Whether you want to call it bioelectricity, whether you want to call it chakras or auras or whatever, it's all the same thing. So until someone has an explanation that offers more insight while also giving the same benefit of feeling great and having mind-blowing visualizations and realizations in the process, I'm going to continue on with what I know because it works very well for me. That said, the aura is said to be a reflection of our current state of being. Some people can see it, some can't. I have, but I can't do it at will. It's kind of annoying. With the colors, usually the same or similar to that of our chakras, they're indicative of our vibe or our state of being at any given time. Now, since there are no such thing as happy chakras, it's easier to think of them as being on a spectrum, with happy and loving emotions on the lighter and brighter end to heavier and darker ones on the other. Just as red is associated with the root chakra, it is also known to be on the heavier side, but with brown, gray, and black being even heavier. In fact, red can also just be associated with fiery or exuberant, very energetic. So it's kind of a misnomer at times, but you want to think of them more in terms of being associated with the chakras in a positive and at times a negative way. That's not to say that red can't be happy and vibrant, like I said. It just depends on the hue and the vibrance. I often have some red in my aura because I have a robust and vibrant energy about me, though usually just a tinge, probably more after a few drinks. The hard part is learning how to cleanse my blockages. It's having to do what many refer to as shadow work, which I mentioned before. That's where we confront the darkest aspects of our lives, which I remember thinking at the beginning, well, this should be easy, since I've always considered myself to be pretty well adjusted. Considering everything that I've gone through, especially, I had chosen long ago to confront my demons, just to face them, make peace with them, and move on. So I would not preclude myself from experiences that I wanted to have, even if that meant forgiving people that I didn't want to, or saying things that made me feel uncomfortable. You can probably see where my demons were at one point in time, or various points in time. My motto for the last couple of decades was, shame is for sissies, which I feel somewhat different about now, though mostly true. I now understand that it is okay to feel shame, but that it does not have to ruin your experience. That said, I had to reach pretty far backwards to the root of pain that I thought I buried long ago. Only then did it occur to me how much it was still affecting me. As previously discussed, there had been a few recent deaths in my family. One in particular, my nearly 84-year-old grandfather, which was very recent, very painful, and not just because of his passing either, but in the division of my family as a result. I had expressed concerns that made people feel defensive, and as a result, they disowned me. I only say that because apparently it had been bothering me ever since. At least, mind you, this was only like 6 or 8 months since that had happened. But knowing that most of the people were my elders, and were where most of my family flocked to for holidays and gatherings, that meant that by extension, I was being isolated from most of my family, unless I made the effort to connect with them, which I had been doing because my grandfather had asked me to take over our family reunion in order to ensure that it would continue, because some people were saying that they wouldn't anymore. It went off without a hitch first summer, but those people in particular decided to do it on the same exact day the following year, and now I just let them do it. Had that happened toward the beginning of my journey, I would have probably felt rejected, heartbroken, a bunch of other sad stuff, but I kind of felt like it was just meant to be. That was an interesting part about my journey that had taken me back to my childhood, where feeling very different from everyone else brought back into my awareness. I was already learning what self-love really meant, but for the first time ever, I saw it all from my eyes as a small child. Everything that had happened all made sense to me from that perspective. I did not want to hurt or feel ashamed, but in some ways I did not have any control over the situation either. And that was why I always felt so defensive in my efforts to prove myself and fit in. But having accomplished everything that I had ever hoped to in my career, I no longer felt the need to prove myself to anyone anymore and cared very little for what people choosing not to communicate effectively or were too busy battling their own demons thought of me. I was able to clear some of that swirling Picasso tornado that clouded my mind as a result. Now, don't get me wrong, this was not an easy process. That revelation came through multiple meditations and a couple of which that were paired with mushrooms, though I was eventually able to get there. In doing so, other mental blocks were released in the process as well, though. It was only after doing so that I would begin to actually heal enough to be comfortable talking about all of the strange things that I had encountered throughout my life. As such, I will next be doing a supplemental video this week. Well, audio file this week, my first ever guided meditation. I could not have fathomed the idea of doing that a couple years ago, and I wanted to fairly shortly into the process because I kind of developed this sort of chair yoga pretty early on that I didn't do that one specifically for the same reasons we've discussed here, but it was a nice way to burn off some energy and recenter at times, which is where I would listen to what I call meditative, binaural beats, kind of like EDM type of music at the same time as just really bobbing along. I'll have to do one of those sometimes. I've been interested in doing something like that and showing people examples of how I do that because I was really able to tighten up my core in the process. And next week I'll share more about my dreams and trance-induced visualizations, as I believe discussing these can be extremely beneficial to you as you explore the subconscious parts of your mind, which is where this all comes from. Most people may not be aware of this, but this is one way of accessing the executive functioning parts of our brain, which are usually accessed through stress or our fight or flight responses. In addition to all of the work that's already been done, going in the background, since this is all also the aspect that handles our breathing and heartbeat, this is referred to as our parasympathetic nervous system. So that part of your brain is basically handling all of the functioning that you don't have to think about. Imagine having complete control of your body by being able to talk directly to the executive decision-making part of your brain, or being able to induce production of endorphins by reaching a state of relaxation and bliss whenever you want. Well, guess what? You can. Did you know that the placebo effect has been proven to account for anywhere between 35 to 50% of blind study trials? Let me break that down for you. 35 to 50% of participants in blind and double-blind studies are being cured of whatever ailment they went in for with the placebo. So they're not even getting the real thing. They just believe so much that it's going to work that it does. What does that tell you? Depending on the trial and probably how confident the participants feel about the product that they are testing determine how successful it is, I believe. I believe there's a direct connection between this and the work done by Dr. Joe Dispenza. As a person who has spent much of their life living as though they had everything to prove, I can tell you with assurance that I've accomplished things I am frequently told cannot be done, which I am working on not laughing out loud about these days when people tell me that they can't. But I usually do call out bullshit. Take meditation itself, for example. Countless people have said they can't. So guess what? They can't. Shocker. Imagine all the other things they preclude themselves from by making such assumptions, usually without even trying it more than once or twice, if at all. It's a shame too, because let me tell you, reaching that sweet spot where the endorphins kick in is pretty much indescribable. The only closest word that I can come up with would be braingasm. Yep, that's right, I said it. Aside from all that good fun, I've always had a very different opinion about my body too, which would sound strange to you, but I've always seen it as kind of like a car that I drive. That I try to keep it in relatively good condition, you might say. Not that I plan on trading it in anytime soon. But since I saw myself as a child, dying when I'm old and surrounded by my family members, it had started out as me wishing I had people paying attention to me all the time. Like they did when I was 6, when a parent would call in or have to call out from work because they were forced to either come or stay home with me because I was sick. We would grab some OJ from the store and snuggle up on the couch. Those were some of my fondest memories. In this one instance, I daydreamed about if I was really sick, and I tried to imagine what it would be like to have people come to be with me, just to see me. Years later, I'd find out why I couldn't see that image or any other ones that I was trying to. But a much older version of me did pop into my head out of nowhere. I was saying my goodbyes to people. As I mentioned before, I kind of just got this feeling that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. I saw myself saying goodbye to people I knew were related to me, but for some reason I had this feeling that I could barely remember them. So for those of you whom I've joked with about wanting to die really old and clueless as to where I am, that's why. I guess it's been my kind of own little inside joke ever since, knowing that there would probably be, to some degree, some significant memory loss by that time. In any case, I am regularly told that I or someone else can't or shouldn't do any number of things that I do on a regular basis just fine. I still drink out of water hoses. I still play in the dirt, go swimming in rivers and lakes, hike, drive, garden, explore, sing, dance, meditate, and I eat a plant-based diet. Despite having been told at one time or another that those things were too dangerous for me. The first step is in understanding what is right for you by taking a long, hard look at what is working for you in life and what isn't. That's shadow work. In my shadow work, I explored this over and over and freaking over again because it did not make itself obvious all the time. But over time, I would circle back to some things that occurred to me during my normal day-to-day life, which made me feel tense or anxious. I'm going to pause there for just a second because some of that is also because I got into Lee Harris in the Z's, who kind of walk you through some of that stuff, and they explain to be aware of some of the stuff that makes you feel tense, that makes you feel bothered or anxious, and you can't quite put your finger on why, to sit with that. So that's what I did. I would sit with those things in meditation at night, consider what it was about those things that would bother me. Being pretty good at confronting it once I figured it out, I could easily face my demons, process everything, and move on. Eventually, even going the extra step that I had learned through advanced meditative techniques of looking back at when that thing first started bothering me and considering how it changed my perspective regarding that person, situation, viewpoint, whatever it was, and reframe it from that point going forward. Over time, I was able to reconcile much of the things causing blockages, which I better understood after knocking a few of the big ones out. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not simple stuff. This is self-love. This is what self-love really means. Getting down to the meat of who you really are and who you want to be and reconciling that. Or some prefer to call it psychology. While I do recommend working toward this area in order to heal past wounds to help you live a happier life, things like cleansings and goal settings are great places to start in meditation, which brings us full circle in our conversation today. Of course, there are other things that you can do to help calm and relax you, change your energy, get those endorphins going, and tap into the greater consciousness that exists all around us, like sound baths, Reiki, acupuncture, working out, or even just walking, laughing, hugging. All great examples of things that we can and oftentimes should be doing. But there's nothing quite like the empowerment of learning to control your thoughts and mind. Beyond that, belief itself is extremely powerful, as demonstrated by the placebo effect. I challenge any one of you to do a Google search for "can one think themselves healthy?" and read over the results that come back. The same goes for psychosomatic effect of those who always think of themselves as sick, sometimes known as hypochondriacs, obsessed with their health until they worry themselves to death. It's been known to happen. You have more control over your body and mind than you know, than most believe. So whether you're seeing them as your vehicle, or as I now joke, my spacesuit, or not, I hope you've taken away something from our discussion today, in knowing that there are people all over the world healing their minds, bodies, and souls from within. To help get you started, as promised, I am including with this episode today a guided meditation to cleanse your chakras and direct your energy to problem areas where you may be experiencing chronic pain and discomfort. Remember, going in, that just with hypnosis, and even as demonstrated time and time again through prayer and what many know to be miracles, the key is in believing, and the sheer will to do so hard enough that it becomes your reality, which is where both the laws of attraction and correspondence come into play. As above, so below. Thank you again for joining me today. Next time, we will take a look at the lighter and brighter side of my journey, as I will discuss some of my paranormal experiences, stories, dreams, nightmares, and I'll even tell you a funny story or two, like how I came up with calling my body a spacesuit. Be sure to check out my meditation and let me know what you think. Lots of love to you all. Until next time.